Have you ever felt that? You've put in the hours, maybe years studying English.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the grammar down, your vocabulary is pretty solid. Maybe you even pronounce words clearly.
Mm-hmm.
But when you speak, it just doesn't sound quite right.
Yeah, like not like you. Or maybe not like how you hear other people talking naturally.
Exactly. It feels kind of stiff or like you're playing a recording that's just a bit too careful. Conversations maybe don't flow,
Hmm.
and you're left wondering, why does it feel so different from the easy way others seem to chat?
It's such a common feeling, isn't it? A point many learners hit after they've sort of mastered the basics. You have all the correct pieces, but that natural rhythm, that uh, spontaneous connection that makes language feel really alive, it seems just out of reach
What's
sometimes.
that subtle thing?
Yeah, it's often unwritten, the difference between being, grammatically correct and sounding genuinely, well, natural.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today, this journey, this shift from just correct English to natural English.
Right.
It's a path that's, well, it seems less about memorizing even more rules and more about finding the music of it, the flow, making real connections, and ultimately finding your authentic voice in the language.
And we're going to explore this whole idea through the really compelling story of a young woman named Emma. Our sources, they give us these glimpses into her experience, almost like chapters from her own personal journey,
Okay.
detailing her path from feeling, frustrated and a bit artificial to finally sounding like herself when she speaks English.
Okay, so our mission here is to pull out the most valuable insights from Emma's experience. What were the crucial shifts for her? The surprising discoveries, maybe the practical steps she took that let her move beyond just correctness and truly sound.
Well, natural.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
Let's do it, starting right at that frustration point she felt.
Emma's situation is, I think, incredibly relatable for a lot of people. She'd studied English for over a decade.
Wow, 10 years plus. Yeah, think about that. So by all the sort of traditional measures, she was doing everything right. She knew her grammar rules, drilled the verb tenses, built up a really large vocabulary. Her pronunciation was clear, her sentences were, grammatically sound.
So, on paper,
Yeah,
perfect. Acing it.
pretty much. But inside, there was this gap, this feeling. She didn't just want to be understood. She really desperately wanted to sound natural, like how people actually talk.
Right?
She described her own speech as feeling stiff, slow, and unnatural, like a recording played too carefully.
Oof, I could feel that. And this frustration, it really hit home during a specific moment, didn't it?
It did. A video call with a recruiter. She'd prepared like crazy, trying to be super clear and correct.
Ah.
But the conversation, it just felt like an exam.
Awkward.
Yeah, and she felt the recruiter seemed a bit distracted. It just didn't flow properly.
And she couldn't help comparing herself then.
No, she looked at native speakers or maybe friends who'd lived abroad, and their English felt smooth and relaxed, full of expressions. It sounded friendly and approachable. Hers felt performative, like she was putting on an act.
And that contrast, that feeling led her to a kind of core realization.
Yeah, a big one. That sounding natural isn't just about knowing rules. It's about capturing the spirit of the language, the rhythm. She said she wanted her English to feel like music, not a machine.
I love that. Music, not a machine. So what was the very first kind of brave step she took after realizing that?
Well, her first really crucial decision was to completely shift her focus. Instead of doing more grammar drills, she committed to really listen more carefully to real people.
Okay.
And maybe even more importantly, to speak more freely, even if it meant making mistakes. She decided to stop being so afraid of sounding different or imperfect.
That decision right there, to embrace imperfection, that is such a massive hurdle for so many learners. And I bet a lot of you listening can totally relate to that feeling. Being stuck between wanting to be perfectly correct and actually sounding natural.
Hmm.
Why is that such a common place to get stuck?
I think it's because traditional language learning often prioritizes getting it right above all else.
Right, accuracy first.
Exactly. Over making it sound real, we're kind of trained to avoid errors at all costs, which naturally makes us cautious, maybe hesitant. We learn the words, we learn the rules, but we don't always learn how they actually, connect and flow together out there in the real world.
Which leads us perfectly into the next stage of Emma's journey, then learning those unwritten rules of sound and rhythm.
Precisely. So Emma started these new listening habits. She just immersed herself in the sounds, rhythms, and moods of natural English. Not textbooks, but real conversations.
Like what kinds of things?
Podcasts between friends, just everyday chats she could overhear, interviews, that kind of thing.
That must have felt pretty overwhelming at first, though. I mean, real speech is often so much faster and less clear than the examples you get in the classroom.
Oh, it definitely was. She described that initial confusion, words just blending together like a flowing river. She said she had to keep rewinding constantly just to catch what was being said.
But in doing that, in that challenging listening, she stumbled onto something really key about what makes English sound natural.
She did. She realized the real English wasn't in the textbooks. It was in these tiny sounds and patterns, things she started hearing, like I'm gonna instead of the full I am going to.
Uh-huh.
Or noticing how the test sound often disappears in words like don't, or how contractions like it's or can't just blend into one quick, seamless sound. These little shifts in how we pronounce things, they're not mistakes, are they?
No, not at all. They're like the glue holding it together. They're the sounds of connection. Like you said, going to links up to become going, or what are you, often reduces down to whatcha.
Exactly. These are the shortcuts native speakers use all the time without even thinking about it.
In understanding these linking sounds, it's vital, isn't it? Because they create that expected flow, that speed of natural conversation.
Totally. If you pronounce every single word perfectly distinctly, it can actually sound a bit hesitant or maybe even a little robotic, simply because it lacks that common connected speech pattern we're used to hearing.
So, okay, she's noticing these things. How did she then practice capturing not just the words, but that sound, that melody? Because that feels much harder.
It is harder. She developed this technique, basically repeating sentences aloud, but deliberately trying to copy not just the words, but the whole melody.
The music again.
Yeah, the rise and fall of voices, the pauses, the speed, trying to mimic the whole package.
Wow, that sounds tough. You're basically trying to train your mouth and your ear in a completely new way.
It's definitely challenging. She talked about stumbling over tricky sounds, feeling like her tongue just wouldn't move fast enough, and feeling kind of shy or silly practicing alone.
I can imagine.
But she kept at it. She even found a practice partner, Sarah, who's mentioned in the sources. They worked together, correcting each other gently, learning casual phrases like, no worries.
And that probably helped, right? Having someone else going through it, maybe laughing about the mistakes together, made it less daunting.
Oh, for sure. She also used TV shows and movies, but without subtitles sometimes, trying to actually mimic scenes, repeating lines, trying to get the same tone and emotion.
And
She realized it was about capturing the emotion, rhythm, and feeling comfortable with imperfection, not just the words.
so this big shift, focusing on the sound, the music, the rhythm, why do these seemingly small sonic details matter so much for sounding natural?
Well, because they're really at the core of what makes spoken English flow. Our brains are just wired to process language quickly, and these linked sounds, these reductions, they're the natural result of speaking at a conversational speed. So when you use them, you're not just saying words correctly, you're actually participating in the auditory flow that native speakers are accustomed to hearing. It signals a kind of ease and familiarity with the language.
Okay, that makes sense. So she's listening deeply. She's starting to practice copying the sounds and rhythms. What was the next step, the next evolution in how she approached this?
Building on that deep listening, she moved to an even more active technique, shadowing.
Ah, shadowing. Okay.
Yeah, she wasn't just hearing passively anymore. She was actively trying to embody the sound to replicate it in real time.
Shadowing. Remind us exactly how that works. That's when you listen and speak along almost at the same time, right?
Exactly. The way she describes it, you listen to a short piece of audio, could be just a sentence, maybe a short bit of dialogue, and you immediately repeat it aloud. The goal is to match the original speaker's speed, tone, and rhythm exactly.
That sounds like a really intense way to practice, almost like trying to be uh, a linguistic parrot or something.
It is demanding, and she definitely faced challenges. She mentioned clumsy attempts, sometimes speaking way too fast or too slow, her voice sounding kind of flat compared to the original. It takes real persistence, lots of practice.
Did she find ways to check her progress?
Yeah, she even started recording herself shadowing and then comparing her recording to the original audio. That's actually a very effective self-correction tool, hearing yourself objectively.
Okay. So was there a big payoff for all that intense copying and self-correction?
There was a major breakthrough, actually. While she was deep into shadowing, she suddenly realized she was starting to think in English.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that internal translation process, the little voice translating everything back and forth in her head, it began to disappear. The words weren't just abstract symbols anymore, they became alive in her mind.
Wow.
That direct connection is a huge, huge leap towards sounding natural.
Thinking directly in the language that's often seen as the holy grail for learners, isn't it? And her deepened listening. It also tuned her into things beyond just the words themselves, right? Like tone, sarcasm, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. She started noticing the unspoken language more, the meaning that's hidden in someone's tone of voice, recognizing when someone's being sarcastic or telling a joke. Chapter 8 mentions her observing how speakers use pauses, maybe for suspense, or how they vary their tone when telling a story.
These are all crucial elements of natural communication.
Yeah, things you really only pick up by that kind of deep, active listening.
So techniques like shadowing and this deep listening, they're essentially training your ear and your mouth to work together in sync.
Precisely. They help you move beyond just intellectually understanding the rules to physically and auditorily internalizing them. You're training your brain and your vocal cords to produce those natural sounds and rhythms more automatically, almost like how you learn the patterns of your first language without consciously thinking about grammar rules.
Okay, so she's doing the listening, she's doing the shadowing, practicing solo. But the sources make a point that this solo work, while really crucial, can only take you so far.
That's the critical next step, isn't it? Practicing alone builds that essential foundation. But as she put it, the real test was speaking with others in real time without scripts.
Yeah.
You have to take all that practice out of the safety of your room and into the unpredictable real world.
And the thought of doing that, actually speaking naturally, and let's face it, imperfectly to strangers, that sounds genuinely terrifying for a lot of people.
Oh, it was for Emma. She said the mere idea made her heart race. She felt completely overwhelmed by the prospect of being judged or making embarrassing mistakes.
But she didn't let that stop her. She pushed through that fear.
She did something really brave. She signed up for a local language exchange event. She described the scene, the room buzzing, people speaking English with all kinds of different accents, palms sweaty, voice probably a bit shaky. She just stepped in.
Gutsy. And what did she discover when she actually faced that fear and started interacting with people?
Well, the source really highlights how positive the reception was. The people there were friendly and patient. They didn't judge her for mistakes. If needed, they corrected gently and offered encouragement.
That's great.
And crucially, she realized that when she consciously allowed herself to relax and just embrace the imperfection, the conversations actually became easier and more enjoyable.
That's such a powerful insight. The act of relaxing itself actually helps the conversation flow more naturally. It's not just about the words. And she started using the phrases she'd practiced too.
Yes, that feeling of using a phrase she'd practiced, maybe like "I'm totally hooked," using it spontaneously in a real conversation and having it land naturally, that was incredibly rewarding for her.
I bet.
She even started volunteering as a conversation partner for learners who were less advanced than her, which, ironically, really solidified her own learning and boosted her confidence with everyday, casual phrases like "what's up" or "no worries."
And those inevitable moments of awkwardness, misunderstandings, mispronunciations, she just had to learn to live with them as part of the process.
She learned to see them differently, not as failures, but as stepping stones, basically essential data points, telling her where she needed more practice or maybe more clarity. Every little fumble showed her exactly what to work on next.
And the ultimate payoff, the validation from pushing past that fear and just speaking.
Receiving that feedback from a native speaker that really validated all her progress. "You speak really naturally now. It's like chatting with a friend."
Wow.
That kind of genuine, unprompted feedback is just priceless when you're on this kind of journey.
Yeah, this part of her story is just a massive takeaway for anyone listening, I think. Real-time practice is absolutely irreplaceable. You can listen and shadow all day long, but eventually you just have to jump in and speak. And shifting your whole perspective on mistakes, seeing them as necessary feedback, as data, rather than something to be ashamed of that feels truly game-changing.
You really can't learn to swim without getting in the water, can you? You need that real-world application to integrate everything you've been practicing in isolation.
Okay, so Emma's speaking more, she's interacting, getting positive feedback. What was the next layer of depth she started to uncover on her path towards sounding natural?
Well, she made a new discovery that sounding natural is actually deeply connected to understanding the culture behind the language.
Ah,
It's
okay.
not just about the words or the sounds anymore, but also about the shared knowledge, the context, the assumptions that underpin communication.
The sources mention an example of this hitting home for her when she missed a joke.
Yeah, exactly. She was with a group, they all started laughing at something, and she just didn't get it. When her friends explained it later, referencing maybe movies or bits of history or common sayings, she had this light bulb moment.
Right.
She realized that humor, sarcasm, even just everyday small talk, so much of it depends on this kind of shared cultural knowledge.
So she wasn't just learning English words anymore. She realized she needed to start learning the cultural code, too.
Precisely. She started observing social norms more closely, maybe in TV shows or movies. Things like the very casual, "how's it going?" Which isn't always a literal question demanding a full, detailed answer.
Right, it's more of a greeting sometimes.
Yeah, or understanding British irony or understatement. knowing when and how to say sorry politely in different situations, or even using small talk about the weather as just a simple way to connect with someone.
These are definitely those subtle rules of interaction you don't usually find listed neatly in a language lesson plan.
Not usually. And she found that practicing these cultural norms actually made her conversations feel smoother, more relaxed. She learned to pay more attention to tone of voice, body language, timing, realizing, as the source says, the code changes depending on where you are and who you're talking to.
And Chapter 9 mentions she actively started seeking this cultural knowledge out.
Yeah, reading books or articles, watching films specifically for cultural cues, asking friends about customs. It became clear to her that this was becoming a cultural journey just as much as a language learning journey.
And confidence played a big part here too, it seems.
A huge role. The source notes that even when she didn't have perfect cultural knowledge, just being relaxed, open, smiling, laughing, and showing curiosity made her English feel genuine and approachable to others.
That's important.
And interestingly, sharing aspects of her own culture, like telling a story about a traditional festival from her home country, actually helped create connection too. It wasn't just about absorbing, but also sharing.
So the insight here for you listening is maybe that language is really a living reflection of the people who speak it. And to sound truly natural, you almost need to become a bit of a cultural detective, observing and learning those unwritten rules of interaction.
Absolutely. You're learning how people actually use the language in real life, and that usage is so deeply shaped by their shared experiences, their history, their customs. Understanding that helps you navigate conversations much more instinctively. You can anticipate conversational turns better, recognize polite indirectness, understand humor more easily.
This whole journey, it really sounds like it's leading her closer and closer to just being comfortable being herself in English, which I think brings us to perhaps the deepest insight of all from her experience.
Yeah, this is where she really grappled with the idea of authenticity. She'd spent months diligently, copying native speakers, and it had definitely improved her fluency. But she started to feel, well, like a copy, not an original.
Hmm.
She worried she was losing her own unique way of expressing herself in the process.
And she shared this concern with her practice partner, Sarah.
She did, and Sarah offered just a crucial piece of wisdom. She said something like, your accent, your expressions, and your way of speaking, they're part of who you are. You don't have to erase your identity. Your voice matters.
Wow. That is incredibly liberating, isn't it? It reframes the goal. It's not about becoming someone else or losing your identity. It's about being yourself, but in English.
Exactly. And getting that permission, hearing that, led Emma to really start embracing her own authenticity. She began experimenting, speaking with her own natural rhythms, her own pauses, her own tone of voice, allowing herself to laugh naturally when she genuinely felt like it.
Was that scary at first? Wondering if people would still understand or accept it?
A little vulnerable, yeah. But she found, maybe surprisingly, that people responded really positively to her genuineness. It felt more real.
Even her accent, which she'd probably initially worried about or tried to minimize, that became part of her authentic voice too.
Yes, instead of trying to hide it, she began to see it differently. As a bridge connecting her past and her present, something that actually made her English richer and more personal. It carried the echo of her own story, her own culture.
And speaking of story, the source really highlights the power of storytelling in this whole process of finding your voice.
Oh, absolutely. Chapter 7 really emphasizes that language, at its core, is a bridge. It's how we share our experiences, emotions, ideas, and stories. Stories are what make language come alive, make it human. Emma saw this really vividly when she was listening to others share stories at a cafe.
Yeah, but telling her own stories in English, that must have felt like another pretty big step, another hurdle.
It was daunting. But she started small, maybe writing stories down first, then practicing retelling them aloud, but focusing more on the flow and the emotional arc of the story, rather than getting every single grammatical detail perfect. She learned some simple story starter phrases too, like, "You won't believe what happened," just to get going.
And the feeling she got from actually sharing those stories.
When she shared her own stories, her English felt less stiff, much more natural, because the focus shifted entirely from correctness to connection and meaning.
Right.
She recounts sharing a story about her very first day at university and feeling this powerful sense of belonging when others responded, sharing their own similar stories. That connection was key.
So the deep connection, the real naturalness, it comes from sharing who you authentically are through your stories.
Precisely. As she came to realize, when I tell my stories, I am not just practicing English, I am connecting with others. That's the true meaning of sounding natural. It's about human connection, not just linguistic perfection.
This feels like the most profound takeaway for you listening, doesn't it? Sounding natural isn't about achieving flawless perfection or erasing who you are to sound like someone else. It's about finding a way to let your own personality, your experiences, your unique story actually come through in this new language. How can you, listening right now, start allowing your authentic self to show up more in your English?
And I think it really begins with giving yourself permission. Permission to keep your accent, if you have one. Permission to use expressions that feel like you. Permission to share your perspective, your humor. Maybe experiment with expressing your own emotions using your own natural rhythm. Even just sharing a simple anecdote about your day. See how liberating it feels to just be you when you speak.
So let's just quickly try and bring together the key lessons from Emma's journey, as these sources have illuminated them for us. It definitely started with a strong base of grammar and vocabulary, yes, but the path to sounding truly natural required much, much more than just that.
Yeah, it required dedicated, active listening to real, everyday English, really internalizing the sounds and rhythms. It demanded practicing speaking, even when it was scary, pushing past that fear, and crucially, reframing mistakes not as failures, but as essential feedback.
It involved becoming that sort of cultural detective, understanding the unwritten rules and the context behind the words.
Right.
And maybe most pivotally, it was about that big realization that naturalness isn't about perfectly imitating someone else or striving for some unattainable ideal of perfection. It's about finding and embracing your own authentic voice in English. It's just about being real.
Exactly. As it's summarized in the sources, fluency ultimately was not just speaking quickly or flawlessly, it was speaking freely with confidence and authenticity. It's about the ability to connect, to share your world, and to feel like you truly belong in the conversation.
Emma's story really shows us this is possible. It's a process, step by step, sound by sound, story by story. It's a journey of growth, practice, and definitely self-discovery. Her own words capture the essence beautifully. To sound natural in English is to be yourself, curious, confident, and courageous.
She found that language really is a bridge, helping us connect with other people and also grow as individuals. Her English became more than just a practical skill. It became a vehicle for her story, her culture, and her authentic self.
And that brings us nicely to a final thought for you to maybe ponder, based on everything we've explored here through Emma's journey. If sounding natural isn't really about being perfect, but much more about being yourself and connecting with others, what's one small step, just one tiny thing, that you could take today to bring just a little bit more of your authentic self into your English conversations?
Just remember, your English, with your unique background, your experiences, your personality all woven into it, it's valuable precisely because it is yours. It's not about mimicking someone else, it's about expressing yourself
Think about that next time you speak English. How can you let just a little bit more of you shine through?